electric vehicles and personal finance all relate to each other. You may not have an EV, you may not be involved at all in the AI industry, but over the next 4 or 5 years, AI and EVs are going to affect everybody in the United States, certainly, and they'll probably affect your personal finances and even your retirement in certain ways. At some point in your life, you probably want to plan on retiring. If you're in your 30s or 40s or 50s, it may seem like a long way off, but even if you're in your 40s, you may want to retire at some point in your 60s. That's 20 years away. Think about going backwards 20 years in your history. If you're 45, think back of how far long ago 25 seems. May not seem like it was that long ago. 20 years from now is going to be, it's going to happen faster than you think, right? So AI and EVs, they're both two-letter acronyms, two-letter abbreviations. They may not seem like they're related to each other or related to you, but we're going to talk about how your personal finances and your secure retirement or your future, whether or not you want to retire and stop working, uh, that's up to you. But at some point, you're going to be in your 60s, maybe in your 50s, and you don't want to work in the same way you do now. You don't want to toil away for an employer, for a boss, for some other company to result or to get the results of your efforts, right? And even all the people that work for our organizations, technically they work for our organization, but we want them to be rewarded with the results of our organizations, and all of our people do that, and many companies do that. But if you are strictly an employee, just get paid a number of hours, and you don't have any say or stake in the results. If your company does very well, you don't necessarily get that much more money, maybe a small bonus or a stipend. You have to do that on your own. So first of all, a lot of people ask, why should I be listening to you, right? The things we're going to talk about today, EVs, AI, personal finance, it doesn't take a genius to figure this out. We're going to put it in a way that's very easy to see, but it doesn't take a genius to do this. You will very easily understand this. This may be illuminating to you. You may look at it in a different light. Although I am a genius, right? You can see right here, Mensa, member since 1995. But the genius part of what I bring to the table is not about figuring this out. Anybody can see this. It's just about a vision of being able to lay it out there for you to make it easy to see. So we always remain humble in terms of everybody should have this knowledge, and everybody should have financial security, no matter how much you make. So let's start with taking a look at what the current state of the average person is. Here's an article that came out just the other day. Here's how much Americans in their 30s have in their 401ks. By age 30, you should have close to the equivalent of 1 year's salary for retirement. Okay. That's a number. And this is a suggestion from Fidelity Investments. Again, it doesn't take a genius to figure that out. Americans between the ages of 30 and 39 have a median balance of $17,000 in their 401k as of 2023. That's not a huge amount, right? The average is a little higher. The average is 46,000. Now that average is skewed by people who have large volumes, right? So if you have somebody that has 2 million, it's going to skew it. The median is the number that the equal amount of people have more and equal amount have less. So at 17,400, there's the same number of people that have less than that and the same number of people that have more. The average is a little different, but even the average at 46,000 isn't a ton. It's not equal to the average income of the median United States citizen. If your retirement savings fall below, the first thing to remember is you're not a failure. Here's the thing. If it falls below that, it's almost nothing. Even if you have 40,000 in your 401k, that's not going to do anything for retirement. We're going to talk about how you can do something that will give you the equivalent of $1 million in retirement without having to save up $1 million. We're going to talk about that here in a minute. But they talk about fixing it on one number may not be healthy. You don't have the context. It doesn't take away progress. This is all true, right? But just because they're saying if you don't have 46,000 in your 401k, you're not a failure. That's true. Nobody's a failure. We're all humans. We're all valuable. But you do want to make sure that you're preparing for your future, and don't despair. Don't feel like it's hopeless if you can't see a pathway to having $1 million saved up. They say you should put 15% of your income into retirement. That's great. But if that seems like a lot, you can start off small. Well, first of all, one of the things that's challenging for employees is the current landscape of many jobs is that AI, here we go, AI just starting to mix in, is going to put some downward pressure, maybe not on income, but on future growth and advancements, maybe on future raises in income. It may block certain career paths. Your job may be just fine now, but the job that's 2 or 3 promotions from now may not exist because of AI, right? Your career path may deviate from what it would have been 2 years ago because AI is changing the landscape. Perfect example is even in the creative arena, in the area of software development, artistic endeavors, media, even things like creative writing, AI is a factor. And here's why. ChatGPT, which everybody's heard of, right, is basically putting together content from the web and creating new outputs for it. So if you have something you've written, a book, a website, a blog post, Silicon Valley using ChatGPT is using other people's products to create new content. So if you wrote a blog post about, I don't know, vacations, and that blog post would normally have some value to consumers and you may get benefit from it. Maybe you work for a company that produces TV shows. Maybe you are an employee of an insurance company. All of your work product and your efforts and the things you write are now being culled by ChatGPT and AI into new content that's fresh. And it's kind of like, money laundering. It's laundering this content, this workflow, to where it's not benefiting the person that actually wrote it. Look, we all create things based on knowledge we've had before. You may have learned things from a mentor, maybe a prior employer, maybe you read something online. Everything you create and write comes from the accumulated knowledge you've put together. But at least now you as a person are getting credit for it. Somebody is benefiting from it. When ChatGPT collates all this information the same way a person would, there's nobody that gets a benefit for it. No human that gets a benefit for it. So this is going to be something that will change the landscape of personal income. AI, this is just one way, right? If you are a person who's, let's go back to the insurance industry, an up and coming insurance executive professional, it may be that higher job that you're looking at, maybe underwriting, maybe management of an insurance team, may not exist in 2 or 3 years or 5 years because AI maybe won't be doing the job, but have created tools so that the company can execute those managerial tasks using automation, or that the lower level employees that are paid less may be able to function without having that supervision, right? So AI is coming into this. So what do you do about it? It's unlikely that for most intelligent, intellectual professionals in any industry, that your income's going to go down. It's probably not going to happen. Your income may not go up, but it's probably not going to go down. There will be opportunities for smart people to advance and still have raises and still have a career path, but it's not going to be as steep of a trajectory as it may have been in the past. So what do you do in the meantime? Well, first, most important thing to do is figure out how are you going to fund a retirement? And that may seem like a pipe dream for you, but let's look at some math, right? If you saved up $1 million, there's $1 million, and at your retirement, you wanted to live off the interest of that. And let's say the interest is going to be 5%, right? That would make you $50,000 a year, or about $4,000 a month. Okay. Now, that's probably less than what you earned, especially in the last 5 years of your career working. You know, right now, even if you make $50,000 a month, which you probably make more than that, 20 years from now, $50,000 a month is not going to have the same buying power as it does now. Go back in time 20 years, right? What did 50,000 buy in 2003, right? There were homes that you could buy a cheap house for 100 to 120,000. You could buy half a house for 50,000. Now you probably can't even buy 1/10 of a house. Most houses are close to 500 grand. The median price is 460. So that 50,000 that you made in 2003 would buy you half of a house. 50,000 right now buys you 1/10 of a house. What's it going to buy you in 2043 when you want to retire? Not much. So even if you have $1 million, it's not going to really give you a whole lot to draw from. Now, here's the question. How do you create $1 million worth of benefit in your retirement? Well, the easy thing is to create a separate income from your main job. And here's the reason why. You're not going to become rich or wealthy, two different things. Rich and wealthy are two different things. Or even financially secure in retirement from your main job. Doesn't matter how much you save up. Doesn't matter how much you put into 401k. You can't save your way to wealth. Very, very difficult. Now, there's some things you can do with savings from an income. Put it in real estate, put it in stocks. You may be able to, build up a little bit of a nest egg. But for most people, that's not going to be possible. You can save up $1 million, and even $1 million. If you work for 40 years, let's look at the math again. You work for 40 years from the time you're 25 until the time you're 65, right? And you want to save up $1 million. Here's your $1 million again, divided by 40 years. That means you need to save $25,000 a year. That means you need to put more than $2,000 a month into your retirement savings to save up $1 million for 40 years. Most people aren't going to be able to do that. Think about right now. Do you have an extra $2,000 a month? And that's after taxes, right? So even if you make $80,000 a year, and you might think, well, gee, I can, live on 60 and put the other 25 in the bank. You can't do that because that 80,000 after taxes is barely 60,000 take home, right? To take $25,000 away from that is taking almost half your income and putting it into savings. It's probably not going to work, right? So coming up with $1 million is going to be tough to begin with. Some people with higher incomes, if you make 150, 200, 400,000, 500,000, sure, you can save up faster. But what's the trick? Well, remember we said $1 million times 5%, it's $50,000 a year, $4,000 a month. What can you do to come up with an alternate way of having that $4,000 a month? Because look, if you're retired and have little or no expenses, your house is paid off, your cars are paid off, and we'll talk about real estate in a moment. How are you going to come up with, if you had that extra $4,000 a month, that'd be pretty comfortable. Even if you had $4,000 extra a month right now with your bills, think about how great that would be. Well, here's what you do. No matter how old you are, 25, 45, 55, start to create a separate sideline business. We've talked about it before. Some people call it a side gig, side hustle, moonlighting, right? Whatever you want to call it. Make sure it's something that has 5 major criteria. One is that it's digital. You don't want to be shipping products, especially big products, and stocking inventory and manufacturing things. Maybe if you have a little craft that you're building something, that's one thing in in your garage or your shop. But ideally, it would be digital or a service, something that doesn't have physical inventory. Once you start shipping, it adds a whole nother element to it. First of all, the cost of shipping. Look, when you sell something that's a physical product you have to ship, that cost of shipping, you either have to bake it into your price or charge the customer. Even if the shipping is $5, customers don't want to pay it. If they see a price of $20 for something and then all of a sudden shipping is 5, that's going to lower your conversion rate, right? Or if you charge 25, now you're eating the shipping and it throws off your margin. So ideally it would be a service, a digital product. Number 2, you want it to be something that is relatively easy to fulfill. You don't want to have to do a lot of conversation back and forth with the customer. Obviously, they would ideally be able to buy it online, right? Number 3, you want the price point to be reasonable. You don't want the budget of the buyer to be the thing that keeps them from buying it. So ideally, the cost would be $100 plus or minus, be anywhere between 80 and 150, because at that point, almost everybody could buy it if they really wanted to, right? Not everybody's going to throw $100 around like nothing, but at least they would not have budget be their issue. For some people, maybe 100 is an issue, but majority of people. So what's that going to give you? If you want to sell $4,166 a month divided by $100 on average, you need to sell 41 of those items per month, which means if you just count weekdays, which is 26 weekdays, you need to sell about 1.5 of those things per day. Now, that's not going to happen overnight. It may take you months, years to get to that. But think about it. You're only selling 1.5, rounded off to two things, whatever those are, per day to generate that $4,000 a month income. And it could be something on a website. It could be something on an app. It could be something on some forum. The details of how to create that and what the ideas are, we'll talk about in another video. We'll have one whole video upcoming in the next few weeks, which is 20 business ideas you can start with little or no money from scratch without having to spend money on advertising, without having to spend money on any kind of inventory, that anybody can start. And we're not talking about, multi-level marketing or scams or any kind of, sketchy things. These are legitimate businesses that you can build up. Now, the most important thing is any business that builds up is going to take months or years to get to that point. If you start now when you're 40 or 50, if it takes 10 years to get to 4,000 a month, you'll have it done before retirement. What is going to be more difficult? Spending 10 years, a few hours a week, because that's all this is going to take, a few hours a week to build up this business, to create 4,000 a month, or saving up $1 million, which is going to be harder, right? You might not think you could do this. Anybody can. People from all ages, ethnic groups, geographic areas, intellectual ability, business ability. You don't have to be a salesperson talking to people. It's something anybody can do to create that side income, because income in retirement is probably more important than savings. You want to have both, but if you have that extra income, it's like a turbocharger of your retirement. So keep an eye for that video coming up in the next week or so of 20 business ideas, and you can steal them. We want you to do these things. You can start it from scratch with almost nothing. A website address, a domain name costs you $8. You can actually put together a WordPress site for free, and it'll give you some ideas on how to bootstrap it, all these different business ideas to get to that point. We won't get into that now. We're already 20 minutes in. But that's what you want to do for retirement. Now, what about the rest of your life arrangement? Here is how to arrange your life in the meantime. A, buy the cheapest house you can stand right now. If you're not a homeowner, buy the cheapest house you can stand. Not because you're going to make a fortune on your house. That's not the purpose of buying a primary residence, to make a big profit. Because in order to make a profit on your house, you would have to sell it. Even if you buy a house today for 300,000 and in 5 years it's worth $1 million, in order to get that $1 million out, you'd have to sell it, which means you'd have to buy another house, which would cost $1 million. So you're not gaining anything. And you might say, well, I can do a home equity loan. Yeah, but you can't, because now you're paying interest and you don't own the house anymore. The other thing that people think is, well, yeah, if I buy a house and it goes up in value, that benefits me. Well, it might or might not. If it goes up in value, you're going to have to pay more taxes, because your tax assessment is going to go up. Your insurance will go up based on the value of the house. So the appreciation in home value is just a side benefit. The biggest reason to buy a house, to be a homeowner, is that your monthly cost for residential roof over your head is fixed. Your rent can't go up. Your monthly mortgage is not going to go up. Yeah, you might have a little boost in taxes, but that's minor. So the primary purpose of a residence is to lock in your monthly cost of living somewhere. Plus, it starts the clock ticking on having no payment. It's almost like a 20-year prison sentence in reverse, right? You have to, if you get a 30-year mortgage, you have to pay a mortgage for 30 years. At the end of 30 years, your mortgage payment, your monthly payment is zero. When do you want to start getting to that 30-year point? Do you want to start today, or you want to start 5 years from now? Whenever you start your prison sentence of a mortgage, that's one day closer to having it end. And who knows, maybe between now and then, if you do well on your side business or have extra money, you can pay it off early. But having no monthly payment, imagine this. Imagine if you woke up tomorrow and you had zero monthly cost for your where you live, rent or mortgage. Zero. You have to pay any money. And the first of the month, you don't have to write a check for $3,000 for rent, $2,000 for rent, or nothing. And you also had $4,000 coming in before you even step foot into your employment. How would that be? Well, here's a way you can do that. Start your side business today. It might take you 5 or 10 years. Buy the cheapest house you can stand today. And you might think, well, how cheap can a house be? I see them 4, 5, 600,000. Well, let's take a look. Let's take a look. Let's not speculate about this. Like we've talked about before, there are many, many houses out there that are 200,000 or less. Now, the houses I'm going to show you here in a minute may not be exactly what you want. They may not be in the area that you want. They may not be the type of house you want, but it just shows that these houses are available. And we'll talk about, what is the mortgage payment on a house like that? Well, 200,000 house, 30-year fixed mortgage, even at 7.5%, which right now you can probably get a little lower, is $1,400 a month. Can you afford that? It's probably less than you're paying for rent right now. So if somehow you could get a monthly payment at $1,400 and know that that payment is going to go to zero in 20 years, how would that feel? And you might say, well, I would like that. Now, you might have to live not in your dream house for a while, but let's see what that would look like. Houses all over the country. Here's one in Pueblo, Colorado. Small house, clean house. Looks like it's been recently semi-remodeled, right? Decent kitchen, stainless steel. There's an example. I don't want to live in Colorado. That's not the point. The point isn't that this is where you want to live. It's that these houses exist. What's the next one? Well, here's one in Texas. Hot area. 3-bedroom, clean little house, nice yard, right? Weather for Texas. Who knows what it's like there, but it exists. Decent house, hardwood floors, painted, crown moldings, right? Is it the worst house in the world? It's not the worst house in the world. What's the kitchen look like? Not bad. $189,000, right? Let's put that in our mortgage calculator. Instead of 200, let's say you put 9,000 down and you finance 180. And you put in an actual rate that you could probably get 6.5%, boom, you're talking $1,100 a month. How would that be? And that payment's never going to change. What's another example? Let's jump over to Florida. A lot of people like to live in Florida. 159,000. Pensacola, Florida, right near large air base where there's a lot of employment. Okay, this house is a little smaller, still 3 bedroom, right? Hardwood floors, looks like it's got recent paint, washer and dryer, a little bit of a yard, looks like, yeah. Is it the worst house in the world? No, it's a place you could live if you could stand it. And making that decision could make a big difference in the future. What else we got? You want to live near a big city? Here's Monroe, New York. Not too far from New York City, under $200,000. Is this the best house in the world? No, but it's not that bad. Got a little private yard, right? Little woods behind it. Looks like it's got propane heat. Let's see what the inside looks like. Again, not the worst house in the world, not the best house in the world, but it's a place that somebody could live, a little galley kitchen, for 5 or 10 years, save up some money. If you do well, nice yard. Look at that. Sitting area on the side. If you do well in life, you could upgrade anytime you want, but at least you know your payment is not going to go up. Let's look at one more. This one is in Montana. You want to live more kind of country style? 189, 1,100 square foot house. Right? Again, not the best house in the world, not the worst house in the world, but it's a place to live. A little private backyard, fenced in if you have dogs or children. You have a little bit of a garage, right? And who knows what these towns are like. Great Falls, Montana is a western Montana town, pretty decent. The point is that these houses exist all over the country, and you'll see them on our website, Homes Cheap. We don't sell real estate. We're not making any money off selling real estate. We're just trying to point out that these types of opportunities exist. So what do you do about your employment? Well, you want to have a primary job. You don't want to have your entire future based on your side gig, your side hustle, because it's unstable. You don't know what it's going to be like. You want to rely on and take advantage of somebody else paying your bills. You want to have your employer do all the heavy lifting. Look, running a business is tough. You got advertising, you got payroll, you have human resources. You have to make sure that the marketplace accepts your product and your pricing and competitors. It's a hard shoulder to burden. But let your employer do that and just pay you fixed amount every week that you know you can count on. That will give you the security of being able to do these other things, to be able to start your other business, to be able to do to live in a house that maybe isn't the best house. But what you spend some money on? There's 2 things you should spend money on. One is vacations, and we'll talk about how to do that. And the other is vehicles. And you might think that's the opposite of what you heard people say. Sometimes people like Dave Ramsey will tell you not to spend extra money on that. But there's a reason for it. Buy yourself a nicer vehicle than you normally would. Your primary vehicle should be 2 years old or less, or maybe 3. If you buy a new vehicle, drive it for 2 or 3 years, and then buy another new vehicle. And you might think that's going to cost you some money. It might cost you money. You're better off spending a little extra. What's the difference really when you think about it from a new vehicle to a used vehicle? Let's go back to our friend, the calculator. This is not that big a deal. It's not that big a deal. If you bought a brand new vehicle, which right now is going to cost you about $45,000. Whoops, let me clear it out. And you keep that vehicle for 3 years. And then you sell it and get another vehicle. That 3-year-old vehicle is probably going to be worth, who knows what the market is. Right now, a 3-year-old vehicle is worth still 30 grand, 35 grand. But let's just say it loses a little less than half its value, so it's worth $25,000 in 3 years. That means in 3 years, it costs you $20,000 to own that vehicle in 3 years. But remember, as a new vehicle, during that 3 years, it's under full warranty. Almost every vehicle has a 3-year bumper-to-bumper warranty. Some of them even include maintenance. Most vehicles have a 5-year, $60,000 or 8-year warranty on engine, transmission, but for 3 years, you're covered for everything. What if you instead buy a 3-year-old used vehicle, and maybe you pay $28,000 for that vehicle, and already it's 3 years old, and you keep it for 3 years. And maybe at that point you sell it for, what is it going to be worth? 18,000 maybe. Let's just say it's worth 18,000. That means you lost 10,000 in 3 years. Well, the new car cost you 10,000 more over that 3 years, because that one went down 20, this one went down 10. So the difference is $10,000. So if you take that $10,000 divided by 3 years, divided by 12 months, it really only costs you about $300 a month to have a new car versus a used car. Look, if you have a good income and you're a professional executive, that extra 300 a month is probably going to give you some, personal satisfaction of driving a newer vehicle. You don't need to go out and drive a Porsche or Ferrari, but buy a nice new vehicle, for your family. Make sure you're safe. Make sure you're not going to break down on the side of the road. Plus, that $10,000 difference between new and used didn't include any repairs. If you buy a 3-year-old used vehicle, if it needs a set of brakes, if it needs transmission, if it needs shocks, it needs tires, it needs anything, you could spend easily $1,000 or $1,500 or $2,000, and that might take that $10,000 savings and erode it, right? So buy yourself a new vehicle. Now, what do you do for a second car? Most families need 2 cars. Here's what we recommend. For your second vehicle, buy yourself a hybrid for the second vehicle. Not a pure EV, but buy yourself a hybrid. Why should you do that? Well, here's the thing. We're going to transition into electric vehicle conversations. And you might think this doesn't affect you. You might swear up and down you don't want an electric vehicle. You want gasoline. You want a truck. EVs are coming. EVs are going to happen. EVs are going to take off in the next 4 or 5 years. Many states have already put in place laws and rules which make the sale of gasoline vehicles illegal by 2030 or 2035. That's happening, right? You may have to buy an electric vehicle before you really want to. How do we know this? Well, here's a clue. One clue is that this week, Jeep, right? Which, if you think of any vehicle that's a gas vehicle, it's Jeep. Jeeps are off-road, gas, rough and ready, tough vehicles. They are stopping sending gas-powered cars to 14 states. If you live in one of the 14 states that's on their list, as of right now, this, is 6/19/23, so this is this week, you cannot go into a Jeep dealer and buy or find a gas vehicle on the lot. Well, that's only 14 states. Well, what do you think? They're just going to stop there? Well, it's only Jeep. It's not the kind of car I want to buy. What do you think? That's the only one that's going to do it? This is where it's going. This is canary in the coal mine. This is an indicator. Again, you don't have to be a genius, even though I'm a genius, to see where this is going. If you know that Jeep is stopping gas vehicles in 14 states, you know that eventually it's going to expand to other states and expand to other models, right? You can figure this out. You're smart enough to know this, right? You just have to be awake to see that this is the writing on the wall. So what should you do? Well, buy a plug-in hybrid vehicle for your second car, not your first car, your second car. Why should you do that? First, if you keep a vehicle for 5 or 6 years, whatever next new vehicle you buy right now in 2023 could be the last pure gas vehicle you can ever buy. Because by 2030, in most states, there won't be any gas-powered cars. Not in 14 states, but in 50 states. At the same time, there might be a edict in other manufacturers not to even make gas vehicles at all. So you're going to have to plan for whatever vehicles you buy right now to be the last gasoline vehicles you could buy. Now, there might be exceptions. You might still be able to find some gasoline vehicles in 2028, 29, or 30. And you might think, well, that's far away. It's only 6 years. 2023 plus 6 is 2029. The 2024 model year vehicles will be out within the next month. So 6 years from now, that's 2030s are coming out. There may not be that many gas vehicles. How else do we know this? Well, let's take a look. Automotive news. Electrified cars hit 53% share in San Francisco. And you might think, well, I don't live in San Francisco. You're right. Again, canary in a coal mine. This is where it's going. If this is the first major US area to notch sales percentage that high, what does that mean? Implied first. It's not the last. They're going to push these percentages higher. Now, the good news is also the charging times are getting better. Charging 10 minutes versus 20 minutes. There's a bunch of vehicles on this list that if you charge for 10 minutes, you can get over 100-mile range. And if you charge for 20 minutes, you can get almost 200-mile range, right? So this is starting to ramp up the acceptability of electric vehicles. It's starting to ramp up the desirability of electric vehicles. In addition, quote from the COO of Kia, we will make the EVs, and now we need California to continue the effort on infrastructure and consumer education before industry volume exceeds capacity and consideration. What they're saying is the manufacturers are saying, look, we did what you asked. We converted our fleet to electric vehicles. We have them ready to go. We can build them. Now you, as the state and the government, they're talking about California, but this goes all over the country. They're telling California and the government, look, start making the desirability and the practicality of these vehicles more desirable. What else is going on? Well, Toyota plans to have 900 plus mile battery range. So look at those 3 data points. You have the Jeep not making gas vehicles for certain states, Toyota making 900 miles of range. Some cities are over 50% EVs. Put all that together, again, doesn't take a genius to figure out what the heck is going on with electric vehicles. In addition to that, there might be some benefits for you. The IRS, federal government, beginning January, you can buy a qualified used electric vehicle and eligible for a clean tax credit of up to $4,000. So for a used vehicle, you might be able to get $4,000 from the government for an EV. Again, add that to your data points. They want EVs to happen. They are putting in influences in all areas of the supply chain, the dealers, the government, the electric companies, to try to get these EVs happening. So there's a good example of how AI, EVs, and your personal finances all mix together. One other thing too to talk about for real estate, this is important, where if you're wanting to consider buying a house and you're thinking, well, I don't necessarily want to downgrade my expectations. Well, here's another reason why it might be possible. Middle-class homebuyers face the worst housing shortages. 50% of earners make $75,000 or less. Whether you do or don't, that's, you know that better than I do. Only 23% of home listings are affordable for these households. So if you make $75,000 or less, which is half the country, only 20-something% of available homes are affordable to that income range. Only 7% of households make $250,000 or more, but 85% of the properties on the market are affordable for $250,000. Another good example of what we talked about. Buy the cheapest house that you can stand. If you find, let's back up another way. There are houses that you can afford to buy today. Doesn't matter what your income is. Doesn't even matter what your down payment is. Even if you only have a few thousand in the bank, there are government programs for 1 or 2% down. And almost anybody, like we talked about, can afford $1,200, $1,400, $1,500 a month. So you can get approved on your income and your down payment. If you have bad credit, it might be a different story. It's better than renting. Even if your apartment is nice and clean and newer, your rent, first of all, it's going to be more today. It's going to be $2,000 more than likely. It's going to be $2,100 next year, $2,400 the year after that. It's going to keep going up. And if you stay there for 5 more years, even if you spend $500, let's look at our old friend, the calculator again. Do some math on monthly payment. So let's say that your rent is $2,200 a month. And instead of that, you buy a house for $200,000 at 7%, and your payment is $1,400 a month. So that's $800 difference today. And if your rent on your apartment doesn't go up a dime for the next 5 years, that's 60 months times 60 months. Stand by. 2,200 minus 1,400 is $800 a month. If you multiply that times 60 months with this 5 years, you're spending an extra $50,000 on rent over the next 5 years. But that's not the worst disadvantage to continuing to rent. The worst one is you are now 5 years farther in to your sentence, your prison sentence of rent. Rent is a prison. So if you started paying $1,400 a month for a sled rundown house that you really don't like to live in, and maybe painted it and fixed it up and got used to living in that kind of environment, you're now 5 years closer to the end of your prison sentence. Otherwise, if you keep renting, you have a sentence without parole. You can start getting parole and credit for good behavior by buying a house. Now, you might say there's disadvantages. You're right. You got to cut the grass. You got to paint the house. The sink breaks, you got to fix it. I can guarantee you that's not going to cost you $50,000 over the course of 5 years. Even if it did, even if it was a break even, you're still better off because your rent's not going to go up. I guarantee you that $2,200 we used as an example, that's going to go up over the next 5 years. I guarantee you that the 30-year mortgage that you would have started, now you're 5 years in, you only have 25 years left. That's not going to be happening at all on your rent. On your rent, you still have another infinite number of years to pay rent. You never can pay rent at zero, no matter how many years you stay in that apartment. Look, there's articles all the time of people that have lived in their apartment for 20, 30 years, and all of a sudden their apartment manager or building owner decides, I want to sell my building. I want to turn it into condos, and they get kicked out. Right? Forget about the rent going up. You get kicked out. I get it. It is tough to imagine living in an older, not quite as nice house. It's not your dream house. But look at that phrase, dream house. It's just a dream. If you only make a decision on something that's dream worthy, you'll never make a decision. Lottery is a dream too, but you're probably not going to win that. So if you do want a dream house, buying a property that's the cheapest one you can stand is going to get you closer to that dream house, even if you don't see it right away. Last subject is, what about vacations? If you're going to spend money on something, spend money on 2 or 3 nice vacations a year. If you can get the time off from your job, maybe in the summer when your kids are out of school, the scheduling part, let's leave that out because that's not part of this conversation. But what about the money part? Can you afford to go on vacation? Well, here's how you do vacation. Find an area of the country that's different from where you live. It could be a few hours away. It can be a few days away. And find an Airbnb. Now, we recommend VRBO instead of Airbnb, but a vacation rental. Don't rent a room in a house. Don't rent a add-on little attachment. If you're going to go on a vacation, make it a nice house. Ideally, it would be a single family standalone house that you can rent in a nice area. It doesn't have to be right on the beach. It doesn't have to be right on the lake. It could be a block or two in. And plan on it being a place where it's almost like you live there as a local for a week or two. You may think that's a lot of money. Well, maybe it is a lot of money, but there's plenty of these that you can find. Let's go back to our calculator. For $80 or $90 a day. So let's round it off to $100 a day. right? If you take $100 a day and you stay there for a week plus both weekends on either end, that's 9 days. Multiply it times 9 days, that's $900. Round it off to 1,000, right? If you do that 3 times a year, that's going to be $3,000. $3,000 a year divided by 12 months. If you put away $250 a month vacation fund, you can pay for the vacation rental. And if you do it that way, the other expenses are not going to be much more. You might say, well, I have to eat out. You don't have to eat out. If you have a vacation rental that's in a house, you can go to the grocery store and get food. Certainly, you do want to go out to eat and see what's nice in the area. You don't have to go to the high-end steakhouse. You can live like a local. Go to the burger stand, go to the taco shop, go to the food truck, go to the little hot dog stand on the beach. And we'll do another video about examples. You can put together a nice vacation. You don't have to do all the touristy things. In fact, it's almost better off not to do the touristy things, right? There's a guy on public broadcasting, Rick Steves, and he does travel to Europe. And he shows how to travel like a local in Europe and really don't spend a lot of money. You can live in it. They have their version of vacation rentals there, and you can buy from little stands and little markets food that is pretty cheap. You could do the same thing in the US. There's plenty of places in the US you can go on vacation and really have a nice, different perspective on the world. What is the purpose of this vacation? It's not to go to Disneyland and spend $2,000 on the, Star Wars ride. It's to go to a different part of the country, see how the people are, enjoy. Maybe the weather is better. If you live in a cold part of the country, go to someplace warm in the winter. If you live in a hot part of the country in the summer, maybe go to a place that's cooler. Maybe you can explore some new lakes and rivers and streams and back roads, whatever you like to do. The other part is you want to drive. You don't want to fly. Even if it's a 2 or 3 day drive to get there, the amount of money you spend on gas is going to be minimal driving there. Yeah, you might have to add in a hotel on the way there if it's a 2-day drive. But you can get, depending on where you live, to more than half the country in a 2-day drive. If you live in the center of the country, Texas, Oklahoma, Indiana, you can get almost anywhere east of the Mississippi within a 1-day drive if you drive a long way. And unlike airfare, if you have 4 people in your family, it's not times 4. The trip takes the same, costs the same with 4 people in the car versus 1. So drive and plan ahead on where you're going to go. Look at maps. Now with VRBO, and we'll do another video on this, you can there's sneaky ways to find out where that VRBO is by looking at maps and looking at the photos of it. The listing on Airbnb or VRBO will not give you the address, but there's tricks you can find out where it is and see what the neighbors are like, see what the street is like, see if it's a nice part of town or bad part of town, because you're going to be there for a week. You want to make sure you do a little bit of due diligence before you go there. But if you do that, those are some luxury things you can make your life better with a very nominal income. 3 nice vacations every year, have a nice new car, have a decent second car. You don't want to drive a beater. You don't want to drive a junked up car that's going to, break down on the side of the road where you have to spend $2,000 for towing and a transmission. You want to have a nice car, but buy the cheapest house that you can stand if you are a renter. If you're already a homeowner, that's great. But if you're a renter, buy the cheapest house you can stand. Get your own second business going. It may take a while, but we've created dozens of companies, businesses over the last 20 years, dozens of them that make hundreds of thousands of dollars per year just by due diligence and effort, persistence. They don't all work. We've tried probably 100. We probably have 25 or 30 that are very successful. So they don't all work. Some of the other ones would have worked if we stuck with them. So you may try one and maybe migrate to something else. Most of them take, in our experience, 2 or 3 years to go from 0 to making 6 figures. Most of them. Some happen overnight within a few months. But you're not going to know which one is going to be a home run until you try doing it and spend a few hours a week. You don't have to make it a full-time job. You don't have to do any kind of, ruining your personal life or working on weekends or anything like that. Just spend a few hours a week. Spend about the same amount of time that you would normally do playing video games or maybe watching TV. Find one other habit or activity that doesn't really serve you well. Doesn't give you, it may give you some relaxation, but maybe it's kind of mind numbing. And transition that to putting a little time. It's almost like a little hobby. I had a very close friend of mine many years ago, had a full time job, 70 hours a week, running a large retail organization. And in one of our businesses, we had some online research that we needed to get done. And I happened to mention it to him, that, this online research we're trying to find somebody to do. And he said, "Hey, why don't I do it for you?" And I'm thinking, man, you're executive in a major company making six figures at the time. This was 20 years ago. He's probably making 150 or 180 back then. And he said, "I'll do the research. I can do it at night when I get home." And I'm thinking, I thought he was joking. Turns out he said, "Look, I spend an hour or two a night playing video games. I'm online anyways. I might as well do something that makes me money." And to this day, he's probably now making, 400,000 plus. He still makes an extra few thousand a month working on these projects at night. And what he's done, he's taken that money that he didn't need. He could live perfectly fine with the money he made from his job. He's taken that few thousand a month and invested it in some real estate. He bought some condos and some houses. And now he bought those 20 years ago. Well, they're almost paid off now. So I think he has 8 or 9 small condos and townhouses that he bought 20 years ago with mortgages, and maybe the rent kind of broke even on the mortgage. Within 5 or 6 years, he's going to have 8 or 9 condos that he owns free and clear that just generate income. So this is the forward thinking that, again, you don't have to be a genius. It's all math, but if you use it to your advantage, you could be comfortable. You could be not worrying about your bills. Today, maybe you worry about your bills. Maybe you worry about your retirement, but it doesn't have to be that way. It's not going to be easy. It doesn't happen by itself. It doesn't come without effort, but you're already putting effort into some things in life that probably are not rewarding. Maybe video games, maybe who knows what they are. If you put that same effort into something for the future, look, we're not trying to tell you something you don't know, or say we're better than you. We're just trying to point out things that might be an advantage in a way to make 2040 a much more comfortable year by planning in advance. And that's the hardest thing to do, to plan in advance and stick to those plans, especially when there's not any type of immediate gratification that comes from it. Watched a video the other day that was the intake video for the United States Air Force Academy, United States Naval Academy. It was the video that all the new cadets watched. And they said, look, this college experience you have, this academic experience you're going to have for the next 4 years, it's not about the next 4 years. It's about your next 40 years. This period of time is really setting the rest of your life up for great success. And that was a good message. The next 4 years at the Naval Academy might be fun. It might be some rewarding experiences. But the most important thing is to set your life up for success. You graduate from a Naval Academy with a commissioned officer status, you're set up for life. You have a guaranteed job in the Air Force, high income. Or if you want to go into the private sector, you have that degree, you're good to go. You can recreate that and do the same thing without having to get admitted to a military academy or even a college. You can do it yourself with a little bit of paying attention, a little bit of clear thinking, and doing the math. How much is your mortgage? Buy yourself a nice car to be comfortable. Go on some vacations. Create a side business. It may take 5 or 6 years. And who knows? In 10 or 15 years, you might be in a lot better shape. Now, you might say, well, I don't want to wait that long. Well, here's the thing. You're going to wait that long anyways. 2030 is going to happen whether you like it or not. I'm sorry, 2040 is going to happen whether you like it or not. Would you rather have made decisions now that set you up for bliss in 2040 or put you in the same place you are now? You might be in a great place now. Why not be better? And I'm sure if you went back 15 years, you might think, well, gee, I wish I did this or I wish I did that. Imagine executing on some of those things now. It's not too late, even if you're 65. Start now. In 10 years, you'll be 75. That'll be a much better place to be. And more important, because you have less time to make up for it. So we got off a little bit of a tangent. We didn't talk about our normal subjects like investigations and documents and all the other things we talk about a lot, insurance. But this is more of a general overview that might help us out. Let me know what you think in the comments, what things you want to talk about next, and we will see you on the next video.